Kia ora, and welcome to Discipleship Aotearoa. In this podcast, you will hear about, discipleship in Aotearoa. You'll hear from me, Caleb, your host, as well as friends that are passionate about Jesus and discipleship. So, pick up a paddle and jump in the waka with us. We'll learn some tools, resources, and perspectives that will inform, inspire, and maybe even irk you as you live out your walk with Jesus. Welcome to the first episode. Yay, I'm so excited. Before we begin properly, I do think it is right that I share a little bit about me. So my name is Caleb Tangaro Haurua. I am many things I am. Ooh, deep. My whakapapa, my bones, they come from a few areas. Three of my grandparents migrated from the beautiful Cook Islands, Rarotonga, Manahiki, Rakahanga, and Aitutaki, as well as Tahiti. My paternal nana, she descends from more than 20 generations from the Hokianga, otherwise known as Te Pito o Te Ao, the centre of the universe. Ko te rarawa te iwi, ko ngai tūpoto me Ngāti Here te Hapu. All four grandparents migrated to Tamaki Makaurau many decades ago to the promised land that is Southside, South Auckland. I have to give a shout out to my parents, my dad, who taught me that imagination lies at the heart of who God is, and my mum, whose humour and presence remind me that God is good. So I grew up in Otara and Manurewa and currently reside in Puke Tāpapa. I work and worship in Maunga Keke, and I basically live my life in between two maunga, otherwise known as Mount Roskill and One Tree Hill. I didn't grow up in church, but I joined as a high schooler. Little did I know that I was entering into a Baptist church, where I got to experience one of the great charisms of the Baptists, youth group. It was here that I learned about the Messiah, whose kingdom was the opposite to the one that we were living in, the one who loved the poor, the weak, and the marginalized. And I guess from then till now, entering my third decade on this earth, I've been gripped by the task of what it means to follow Jesus. Jesus, to me, is the most fascinating person to ever exist. What he said and what he did constantly draws me out of my little life of mine into the world. And I've seen this happen to people around me too. I've been a pastor, and currently I'm the coordinator of a 1-year formational discipleship experience called Intermission, where each year I journey with a small group of people as we learn to follow Jesus with our heads, hearts, and hands. Which leads us to the kaupapa that is this podcast. What do we mean by discipleship? Was that the name of the ship the disciples sailed in? Sorry, that wasn't very funny. Well, the word discipleship doesn't actually appear in the Bible. The word disciple does. And the word used for that in the New Testament is the word mathetes. Repeat after me, mathetes. And the word has a few meanings, but at the core of those meanings is the words student or learner. Being a disciple means to be a learner. But what kind of learner? The New Testament paints a picture of disciples of Jesus that were interesting. There were ordinary folk. There were some even less than ordinary folk. Some were straight up hated, others misunderstood, and others judged by society, sometimes all three. And each of them somehow saw Jesus despite their circumstances. Sometimes not even in spite of them, they saw them right there in the hole that was their circumstances, and then align their lives with Jesus. And I think there is a beautiful picture for us. So for you listening on, you will be very different to me or to my friends that come on this podcast, but together I think we can learn a little bit more about what it means to align with Jesus. Now, at the same time, I do understand that discipleship is one of those ultra-Christianese words. We say it all the time and we think we know the meaning of it, but we often mean different things, don't we? A simple motif to help us think about discipleship in this podcast is the idea that maybe you or I have a little piece of the puzzle. But if we come together with our little puzzle pieces, we can put them into a larger picture of what's going on. Not only that, but we can learn what role we are to play together as we figure this thing out. In Te Ao Māori, there is a whakatauki, a proverb that says the same thing. Nau te raurau, nāku te raurau, ka ora ai te iwi. With your food basket and my food basket, the people will be fed. But this process is not easy. And it's a vulnerable space to be sitting here speaking into a microphone about discipleship. It's a space where one can be dissected and critiqued and all those other things. So I invite you to come, maybe not so much with a spirit that does that, but instead a spirit ready to be a disciple, ready to learn and unlearn, to deconstruct and reconstruct together. After all, Jesus did this a lot. He was often quoted as saying, "You have heard it said, ... but I say unto you, ... Disciples need to be good at this. On this podcast, you will hear me and others share our dreams of what it means to be disciples, dreams that are often broken, sometimes fulfilled, and nearly always a bit of both. Dreams for the church in Aotearoa to be filled with people who desire to make a difference, for us to be able to see God at work and His kingdom coming every day more and more. There's a metaphor that I've been playing around with that I want to share with you to describe this podcast. And it's the idea of a fresh pie from the bakery. Now, I love pies. I know all the places you should go to get a good pie. And also, this metaphor isn't just for meat lovers. There are non-meat options for pies. So, all-inclusive metaphor. Anyway, I want you to see this podcast like a pie that you can pick up from your local bakery and you can go for a walk and have a nice feed. That you can chew over it, that you can dissect it, that you can just simply enjoy it. The aim of this podcast is to be helpful, to help you and I as we follow out our calling as followers of Jesus. So how should you engage with this podcast? I have one idea. Many of us listen to podcasts by ourselves. That's all good. But what would it look like if you were to incorporate this into how you did your small group, for example, or your home group, or your cell group, whatever you call it? What would it look like if each of you listened to a podcast, maybe a couple of times a year, and you would come together to discuss it with each other? It saves the admin, and also could be a really cool way for you guys to do your discipleship both separate as individuals and together as a community. So just an idea. And to help you on that, every episode will have questions included for you to discuss with those in your community. We really hope that you enjoyed this podcast, and it's our hope that you would interact with the content that's being put out there. After every episode, if you have questions about the episode, questions about discipleship, questions about where are the best pies, just kidding, but any questions, especially those that you've never been able to ask out loud or in the context that you are in, ask those questions. Head over to Discipleship Aotearoa on Instagram, where there you can ask questions on the story highlight, or if you're game, you can record yourself asking a question and tagging us, Discipleship Aotearoa. We will play it back. And in episode 5 specifically, we will be answering your questions, which is going to be really awkward, by the way, if no one actually sends me anything. Yeah, really. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and hope to see you again soon. Ciao. Shameless self-promotion time. If you enjoyed this episode and this podcast, then maybe you or someone you might know will be interested in Intermission. Intermission is a 1-year formational discipleship experience. It's the chance for you to stop and explore the possibilities, to ask questions, to seek answers, to learn and to experience what it means to have a faith that stands and a life that makes a difference in work, in ministry, and in mission. If you want to know more, go to the Kerry Baptist College website, kerry.ac.nz.